Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Story 1. I never should have gone into the cave that morning. 20 years of exploring Mammoth Cave, and I'd never felt anything like this. This creeping feeling that something was terribly wrong. The earthquake had changed things. Changed them in ways that went against everything I knew about caves, about nature itself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Bill Harrison, and I'm a park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park. Was a park ranger, I should say, after what happened down there. I don't think I'll ever go underground again. It started at 4:30 a.m. on October 12, 1962. I was having my usual morning coffee when the ground began to shake. Not violently, just enough to make the spoons rattle in the drawer and send my cat running under the couch. Being a former geology professor, I knew this wasn't your typical Kentucky tremor. Something felt off about it, like the vibrations were coming from inside the earth rather than across it. By sunrise, I was at the cave entrance with my gear. Standard procedure after any seismic activity. Check for structural damage, look for any unstable passages. Make sure everything's safe before letting tourists in. Simple enough. I'd done it dozens of times before. The moment I stepped into the cave, I knew something was different. The air felt wrong. Too cold, maybe 15 degrees colder than usual. In all my years working here, the cave temperature had always stayed steady at around 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Caves don't just change temperature overnight. My old mining lamp, the one Dad gave me years ago, cast yellow light on the limestone walls. Even the echo of my footsteps sounded strange, like the cave was bigger somehow, hollower. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. Post-earthquake inspection, 6:15 a.m. Unusual temperature drop. Echo patterns altered. That's when I saw the first really weird thing. A group of stalactites hung from the ceiling as always, but something caught my eye. Fresh breaks, clean and white against the darker stone. Normal enough after an earthquake, except where was the debris? The floor below was clean. No broken pieces, no rock fragments, nothing. It was as if the broken pieces had simply vanished. I moved deeper into the cave, my lamp beam sweeping across the familiar passages. 20 years of exploring these tunnels had left me with a mental map of every twist and turn. But now, something was making my skin crawl. The water. It wasn't acting right. You know how water drips down in caves, always down, forming those beautiful formations over thousands of years? Well, I saw drops moving up. Yes, up, like gravity had gone crazy in certain spots. The bats were the next thing. Found a cluster of them near the Echo River Passage. Dead. All of them with their necks twisted in the same impossible way, like something had carefully, deliberately snapped each one. In 20 years of documenting every cave death, I'd never seen anything like it. Then I found the new passage. It wasn't on any of my maps, and trust me, I'd developed a mapping system that caught everything. The earthquake must have opened it up. The entrance was about man-sized, perfectly rounded like someone, or something, had carved it out. The air coming from it was even colder, and my compass went crazy when I pointed it toward the opening. But it was the markings that really got to me. Strange symbols carved into the rock around the new passage. At first glance, they looked ancient, like Native American cave art. But when I moved my lamp, they seemed to shift and change, like they were alive somehow. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it must be tricks of the light. But no, those markings were definitely moving. I should have turned back right then. Should have radioed for backup, reported the anomalies, waited for a team. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I was the only ranger willing to check out new passages, and I had my pride. Plus, I needed to know what was causing all this. 20 years of studying caves had taught me that everything had a logical explanation. I took one last look at the twisted bat bodies, adjusted my lamp, and stepped into the new passage. The beam of light seemed to get swallowed up by the high darkness ahead, and the air grew even colder. I could feel it in the 3 fingers I had left on my left hand, the ones I hadn't lost in that cave collapse back in '55. If I'd known what was waiting for me in that passage, I would have run. Run fast and far, and never looked back. But I didn't know, so I went deeper. And that's when things got really strange. I'd spent most of my life in caves. Started as a geology professor at the local university, teaching young minds about how rocks form and mountains grow. But textbooks and classrooms never felt quite right to me. I needed to be underground, exploring, discovering. That's why I became a park ranger 20 years ago. My left hand brushed against the cave wall as I walked deeper into the new passage. The stumps where my fingers used to be tingled. They always did when something wasn't right. Lost those fingers 7 years ago during the Watson Cave collapse. I was trying to save 2 trapped tourists when the ceiling came down. The rocks took my fingers, but I got those people out alive. After that, I wrote the manual on cave rescue operations. Every ranger in the park had to memorize it. The beam of my mining lamp caught something ahead, something that made me stop in my tracks. Fresh claw marks in solid limestone. Not bear marks, not human tool marks. These were different. They looked like they were made by something huge, with claws harder than steel. My hands shook a little as I pulled out my notebook to sketch them. "Keep it together, Bill," I whispered to myself. The sound of my voice helped calm my nerves. After all, I was the expert here. I'd mapped more of Mammoth Cave than anyone else. When other rangers found strange formations or weird passages, they came to me. Just last month, I'd reported some unusual cave formations to the park office, though nothing like what I was seeing now. The passage narrowed, and I had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The limestone walls felt wrong under my fingers. Usually, cave walls are cool and a little damp. These felt alive somehow. I quickly pulled my hand back. My radio crackled, making me jump. Static mostly, but underneath I could hear something that sounded like grinding stone. I tried to call the surface station, but all I got was more of that grinding noise. The air got colder as I moved forward. I pulled out my thermometer, 39 degrees now. Way too cold for this depth. I'd studied cave wildlife patterns for 2 decades, and this kind of temperature drop just doesn't happen naturally. That's when I saw the research equipment. It was sitting there on a flat rock, like someone had carefully placed it. A seismograph. Still running, its needle drawing jagged lines on the paper. Next to it, a half-drunk cup of coffee. Still liquid, but ice cold. A notebook lay open, its pages covered in hasty scribbles. I recognized the handwriting. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of my former students. She'd been leading a research team studying the cave's deeper chambers. They were supposed to check in 3 days ago. No one had heard from them. My heart started beating faster. I'd documented every cave death in Mammoth for the past 20 years. Wrote detailed reports about what went wrong, how to prevent it from happening again. But this felt different. The coffee cup, the running equipment. It was like they'd just vanished in the middle of their work. I should have gone back for help. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I kept thinking about Sarah and her team. If they were trapped down here somewhere, every minute could count. Besides, I was the only ranger willing to explore these new passages. The others said they felt wrong, gave them the creeps. I understood why now. But I'd spent my whole life studying caves, developing new ways to map them, understanding their patterns. If anyone could figure out what was happening here, it had to be me. The passage opened into a larger chamber. My lamp beam caught something on the far wall that made my blood run cold. Cave paintings, but not ancient ones. The pigments looked wet, fresh. They showed strange, twisted figures climbing on cave walls and ceilings. And in the center, a shape that looked almost human but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with too many joints. While I stood there staring at the paintings, something crashed behind me. I spun around, lamp beam cutting through the darkness. The seismograph I'd passed earlier, it was gone. Just gone, like it had never been there. but I could hear it somewhere in the darkness, the scratch of its needle still recording. That's when I noticed the footprints in the mud. They started normally enough, walking along the passage floor. But then they did something impossible. They went up the wall, not like someone climbing with scuff marks and handholds. These looked like someone had just walked straight up, ignoring gravity completely. I've been in some tight spots before. Cave-ins, underground floods, lost tourists panicking in the dark. But standing there, looking at those footprints climbing the wall, I felt real fear for the first time in years. Because none of my experience, none of my knowledge about caves and rocks and underground spaces could explain what I was seeing. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, I heard something moving, something big, and it was coming closer. That sound, I'll never forget it. Like fingernails on stone, but deeper, louder. It echoed through the chamber in a way that didn't make sense. In my 20 years of cave work, I'd learned that echoes always follow rules. Sound bounces in predictable ways. But this echo seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. My lamp beam caught something moving in the darkness ahead. Just a flicker, like a shadow passing through shadow. Then silence, complete silence. Even the dripping of water had stopped. I reached for my sample bag, thinking I should collect some evidence of what I was seeing. But when I opened it, my heart almost stopped. The rock samples I'd collected earlier, the pieces of broken stalactites, the strange limestone fragments, they were gone. The bag was empty. My radio crackled again. Through the static, I heard something that made my skin crawl. It sounded like voices but played backward, mixed with that grinding stone noise. Then, clear as day, I heard Sarah's voice. "Bill, help." "Sarah?" I called out, forgetting to be quiet. "Sarah, where are you?" My voice echoed back to me, but wrong. It sounded like multiple voices were repeating my words, each one slightly different. I shut up quick after that. The temperature dropped. Again. I could see my breath now, little clouds of white in the beam of my lamp. The walls around me, they seemed different. The limestone formations I'd passed earlier now looked like bones, like some giant skeleton was trying to push its way out of the rock. I'd seen plenty of strange rock formations in my time, but these were changing as I watched them. I took out my camera and started taking pictures. Click, wind, click, wind. The mechanical sound of the film advancing was somehow comforting, something normal in this place where nothing made sense anymore. But then I noticed something odd about the camera. The film counter was going backward, counting down even though I was taking pictures. Something dripped on my shoulder. Cold, but not water. I looked up, shining my lamp at the ceiling. The rock above me was moving. No, not moving. Melting. Drops of dissolved limestone were falling upward, defying gravity. I'd seen this earlier near the entrance, but now it was happening right above me. That's when I saw the first real proof that I wasn't just imagining things. In a small side passage, I found Sarah's research equipment. Her special thermometer. The one she'd been so proud of. Her notebooks filled with her neat handwriting. But the last few pages were different. The writing got messy, frantic. The final entry just said, "It's in the walls." While I was reading, the temperature dropped even more. My fingers were getting numb, making it hard to hold the lamp. The beam flickered. Not from weak batteries, I'd just put in new ones that morning. It was like something was eating the light. I heard that sound again, closer now. The scraping, grinding noise. But this time I realized what was strange about it. It wasn't just the sound of something moving over rock. It was the sound of something moving through rock. Like whatever was making that noise could pass through solid limestone like it was water. My compass was spinning wildly now, the needle whirling like a fan. The weird symbols on the walls seemed to be moving again, changing shape, forming new patterns. They looked like warnings, but in a language I'd never seen before. I found more footprints, but these were different from the ones on the wall. These looked like someone had been running, the marks deep and far apart. They led to a narrow crack in the wall, too narrow for a person to fit through. But at the edge of the crack, I found Sarah's hat. It was crushed flat, like something had squeezed it, and her, through that impossible space. My lamp caught something else, a glint of metal in the darkness. I moved closer, keeping my back to the wall. It was a video camera, one of the expensive ones the university used. It was still running, its little red light blinking slowly. The lens was pointed down a long, narrow tunnel. I picked up the camera, hands shaking as I rewound the tape and looked through the viewfinder. The screen showed an empty passage, then static, then something moved across the frame. Something tall and thin, like a person but wrong. Its body seemed to flow like water, bending in ways no human could. The camera fell, pointing at the ceiling, and I saw it crawl across the rock face like a spider, moving impossibly fast. The last frame, just before the video ended, showed its face. I wish I hadn't seen that. It was like looking at one of those pictures where your brain can't quite make sense of what it's seeing. Like a face made of shadows and cave rock, with too many eyes that didn't reflect light the way eyes should. I almost dropped the camera when I heard the grinding sound again. It was very close now, and this time I could feel vibrations in the rock wall behind me, like something was moving through the solid stone, coming right for me. The symbols on the walls were definitely moving now, swirling like they were trying to tell me something. My lamp beam was getting weaker, the darkness pressing in, and in that darkness I heard something that sounded like echolocation clicks, like what bats use but much deeper, much wronger. I had a choice to make. I could try to run back the way I came, back to the normal world where rocks didn't melt upward and shadows didn't crawl on ceilings. Or I could go deeper, try to find Sarah and her team. 20 years of cave rescue experience was telling me to get help, to not play hero. But then I heard Sarah's voice again through the radio static. "Bill, in the deep chamber, hurry." I gripped my lamp tighter, ignored the screaming voice in my head that told me to run, and stepped deeper into the darkness. Sometimes being brave means being stupid. I just hoped I'd live long enough to regret this decision. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. My lamp beam was getting weaker, like the darkness was actually eating the light. I kept one hand on the wall to guide me, even though touching the rock made my skin crawl. The stone felt less like stone and more like something that was just pretending to be stone. Then I found the first body. It wasn't Sarah, it was Tom Martinez, one of her graduate students. He was, changed. His body looked like a statue turned to stone from the feet up. His face was frozen in a look of terror, one arm reaching out like he'd been trying to grab something. When I touched his outstretched hand, it was cold and hard, pure limestone. I'd seen a lot of cave deaths in my time, but nothing like this. This wasn't natural. This wasn't possible. My radio sparked to life again. Through the static, I heard what sounded like students talking, their voices overlapping. "Professor Chen, look at this. The readings don't make sense. Something's moving in the..." Then silence. Just that grinding sound again, closer now. I found their main research camp in a large chamber about 100 feet deeper. Everything was exactly as they'd left it. Half-eaten sandwiches, open notebooks, equipment. Still running, but the weird part? No dust. In caves, everything gets covered in dust within hours. This looked like they'd just stepped away a minute ago. Their main computer was still on, running on battery power. The screen showed some kind of sound analysis program. The graph was going crazy, showing impossible sound patterns, like something was making noises that shouldn't exist in nature. That's when I noticed the bats. Hundreds of them hanging from the ceiling, but they weren't moving. They weren't sleeping either. They were waiting. All their heads were turned in the same direction, toward a dark passage on the far side of the chamber. I'd never seen bats act like this. In 20 years of studying cave wildlife, I'd never seen anything act like this. Heard a splash behind me and spun around, my lamp catching ripples in a small pool of water. Something had disturbed it, but there was nothing there. Then I saw it, footprints appearing in the wet mud one by one, like something invisible was walking toward me. I backed away, trying to keep quiet. My foot hit something. Another video. Camera. I picked it up, hands shaking as I checked the screen. The last recording was from 3 days ago. I pressed play. The video showed Sarah and her team setting up equipment. Normal stuff until about 2 minutes in. The image got shaky. Someone yelled. The camera dropped, pointing at the ceiling, and I saw it. A shape moving across the rock face. Long, thin limbs. A body that seemed to flow like water. It moved like it was swimming through solid rock. Sarah's voice came from off camera. It's intelligent. It's been watching us. All those strange readings. The video cut off. I looked up at the ceiling, my lamp beam seeming weaker than ever. Were those cracks in the rock, or were they trails left by something that could swim through stone? A small rock fell from somewhere above, hitting the water with a quiet plink. Then another. And another, like something was dropping them, testing my reactions. The bats suddenly all moved at once, turning their heads to look at me. Every single one. In the beam of my lamp, their eyes glowed red. That wasn't natural. Bat eyes don't reflect light that way. My radio crackled again, Sarah's voice clearer this time. Bill, we found something. Should never have disturbed it in the walls. The temperature dropped so fast I could see ice crystals forming on the equipment. My breath came out in white clouds. The grinding. Sound was very close now, coming from inside the walls themselves. I found another body. Lisa Chen, Sarah's sister. She was half sunk into the wall, turned to stone like Tom, reaching out toward something I couldn't see. Her face. I'll never forget her face. Pure terror, but also recognition. Like she'd seen something she knew couldn't exist. Something moved at the edge of my lamp beam. Just for a second. A shadow, but wrong. Too tall. Too thin. Moving in ways that nothing should be able to move. Bats suddenly took flight, but not in their usual chaotic way. They flew in a perfect spiral, like they were being controlled. Their wing beats echoed off the walls, creating a sound that made my teeth hurt. I backed toward the passage Sarah's voice had seemed to come from. My lamp flickered, growing weaker and weaker. In the fading light, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. The cave paintings on the walls weren't just moving anymore. They were coming off the rock, peeling away like living things. The grinding sound stopped. Complete silence fell. Even the bats went quiet. In that silence, I heard something that didn't sound like anything from this world. A high-pitched noise that made my head spin, like echolocation but twisted. Wrong. Then I saw it. Not clearly, thank God not clearly, but enough. A shape unfolded from the wall like a paper figure coming off a page. It was tall, so tall it had to bend to fit in the chamber. Its body looked like it was made of living stone, flowing and shifting. Where its face should have been, I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. 20 years of cave rescue experience meant nothing in that moment. I ran like I've never run before. But in the darkness behind me, I heard something worse than my footsteps. I heard it moving through the rock walls themselves, passing through solid stone like it was nothing, trying to cut me off. I had my proof now. I knew what had happened to Sarah and her team. But knowing didn't help, because now it knew I was here. And in the darkness ahead of me, I heard more grinding sounds. Not just from one direction, from all directions. It wasn't alone. I ran until my lungs burned. My lamp was barely working now, giving off just enough light to see a few feet ahead. The grinding sounds were all around me, in the walls, in the ceiling, in the floor. They were hurting me, I realized. Like wolves circling their prey. Only these wolves could swim through solid rock. I stumbled into a large chamber and stopped dead. My weak lamp beam showed something that made my heart skip a beat. Sarah. She was alive. She stood with her back to me, writing something on the wall with a piece of chalk. Sarah, I called out, relief flooding through me. We need to get out of here now. She didn't turn around, just kept writing. As I got closer, I saw what she was writing, over and over. They get in your head, they get in your head, they get in your head. Sarah? My voice shook. She turned around slowly. Her face was half stone. Like whatever had happened to Tom and Lisa was happening to her too. But she was still alive, still moving. One eye was normal, human. The other was solid limestone. "Bill," she said, her voice rough like grinding rocks. "You shouldn't have come." The grinding sounds got louder. The walls themselves seemed to ripple, like they were made of water instead of rock. And then, right behind Sarah, one of them came through the wall. It was like watching someone walk through a curtain, except the curtain was solid limestone. The creature was tall, maybe 9 or 10 feet. Its body looked like flowing stone, constantly shifting and changing. Its arms were too long with too many joints, ending in fingers that were more like stone needles. But its face... I forced myself to look at its face. Where eyes should be, it had deep holes that seemed to go on forever. They weren't empty, though. Inside those holes, I saw tiny points of light, like distant stars, moving in ways that hurt my brain to look at. Sarah smiled, and I saw her teeth were stone now, too. "They're beautiful, aren't they? They've been here forever, living in the rock. We woke them up with our equipment, our vibrations, our noise. They just want to study us, Bill, like we studied them." Another creature emerged from the ceiling, moving like a spider. A third flowed up from the floor. They moved in ways that nothing should be able to move, their bodies bending and twisting impossibly. "Stay back." I held up my lamp like a weapon, for all the good it would do. The first creature made that horrible echolocation sound again. My head spun, and I felt something trying to get into my mind. Images flashed through my head, ancient caves, deeper than anyone had ever gone. Vast chambers filled with these things sleeping in the rock, waiting. "Don't fight it, Bill," Sarah said. Her face was more stone than flesh now. "It doesn't hurt. They just want to make us like them. Part of the rock, part of the cave. Forever." The creatures moved closer. My lamp flickered and died, but I could still see them. They gave off their own faint light like glowing stone. The first one reached for me with those terrible needle fingers. Where they touched the ground, the rock melted and reformed. I backed away until I hit the wall. The wall that was now moving, rippling, more of them emerging from it. Sarah's voice was barely human anymore. "Just let it happen, Bill. You'll understand soon. We'll all understand." But I didn't want to understand. I'd spent 20 years studying caves, learning their secrets. But some secrets should stay buried. My back pressed against something cold and wet. Not rock. Water was seeping through a crack in the wall. And that's when I remembered something from my years of cave studies. Something about limestone. The creature's fingers were inches from my face. Sarah was almost completely stone now, her smile frozen on her face. The others were closing in, their star-filled eyes fixed on me. I still had one chance to escape, to warn everyone. But I had to move fast. My hand found the emergency flare in my belt. The creatures hadn't seen one before. They couldn't know what it was. I had one shot at this. I grabbed Sarah's still human hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Then I lit the flare. The chamber exploded with red light. The creatures recoiled, their stone bodies twisting in ways that would give me nightmares forever. But I didn't wait to watch. I pulled Sarah toward the passage. I'd spotted, the one with water seeping through it. Behind us, I heard that terrible screeching echo, not just from 3 creatures now. It sounded like hundreds. We ran into the dark passage, the flare's red light showing the way, showing me what I desperately hoped to find. The underground river, our only chance of escape. If I was wrong about the limestone, about the water, we were both dead. But right then, being dead seemed better than being turned to stone. The flare's red light bounced off the wet walls as we ran. Sarah stumbled beside me. Half her body turned to stone, making her movements stiff and slow. Behind us, that terrible grinding sound was getting closer. They were coming through the walls again. "The river," I gasped, pulling Sarah along. "They don't like water. That's why the cave formations were all wrong. They avoid the wet areas. Sarah's stone eye glowed in the flare light. "You don't understand," she said, her voice scratchy like sandpaper. "They're not just in these caves, they're in all caves everywhere. We found their markings and their history. They've been here longer than humans." A high-pitched screech cut through the air. My head spun, and more images flashed through my mind. Vast underground cities, creatures moving through stone like fish through water, sleeping for thousands of years until our machines woke them up. We reached the underground river. The water was high from the earthquake, moving fast. Sarah tried to pull away. "I can't," she said. "The water, it hurts now." The stone had spread to her shoulder, creeping down her arm. That's when they caught, up to us. 3 of them came through the walls, more flowing up from the floor, their star-filled eyes fixed on us, needle fingers reaching. The first creature made a sound that wasn't just noise. It was words, somehow forming in my mind. "Join us in the stone." My flare was dying, sputtering red light that barely held back the darkness. I looked at Sarah and saw the stone crawling, up her neck. "Tell everyone," she whispered. Her voice sounded like rocks falling. "Tell them to stop digging, stop searching. Some things should stay buried." Then she pushed me, hard. I fell backward into the rushing river as her body finally turned completely to stone. The cold water shocked me awake, clearing my head of their mind pictures. The current pulled me under, but I could swim. 20 years of cave diving had taught me well. Through the churning water, I saw the creatures reach the river's edge and stop. They wouldn't follow, couldn't follow, but they had other ways too. "Catch me!" The tunnel walls squeezed inward as I swam, the creatures pushing the stone like clay, trying to crush me. The ceiling dropped lower, almost touching the water. They were going to trap me here, seal me in the rock like they'd sealed so many others. My lungs were burning. The flare went out, leaving me in total darkness. Water roared in my ears, mixed with that terrible screeching. More images pounded into my brain. The creatures spreading through all the caves in the world, turning everything to stone, making everything like them. Then I remembered something. The earthquake that morning. It hadn't been natural. They had caused it. But why? The answer hit me like a punch to the gut. They were waking up. All of them, everywhere. The water level was rising as they squeezed the tunnel. Soon there would be no airspace left. I had seconds to make a choice. Try to swim back against the current, where they waited with their stone touch, or push forward into the flooded tunnel and probably drown. Sarah's last words echoed in my head. "Tell them to stop digging." I had to warn everyone, had to stop what was coming. I took one last desperate breath as the ceiling met the water. Then I kicked hard, swimming forward into the darkness, praying I'd find an air pocket before my lungs gave out. Behind me, their screeching followed through the stone, promising that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They'd been patient for thousands of years. They could wait a little longer, and they knew exactly where I was going. My lungs were on fire. I'd been swimming in the darkness for what felt like forever, pushing through the freezing water. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, my head broke the surface. Sweet, wonderful air filled my lungs as I gasped and coughed. I was in the main cavern, the one tourists visited. Somewhere above, sunlight filtered through. The natural entrance, I'd made it, I was safe. Then I heard it, that grinding sound. Not from one direction, but from everywhere. They'd been hurting me here all along. My waterlogged flashlight somehow still worked, throwing weak light across the cavern. What I saw made my heart stop. The walls were moving, not just in one spot, everywhere. Like the whole cave was alive. They emerged all at once, dozens of them, hundreds, flowing out of every surface like living stone. Their star-filled eyes turned to me, needle fingers reaching. And in their midst stood the stone statues that had once been Sarah's team. The creatures' voices filled my head. "You cannot stop what is coming." They were right. I couldn't fight them, couldn't outrun them, but I could still save everyone else. My shaking hands found the emergency blast charges in my waterproof belt bag. We used them for cave rescues to clear blocked passages. I had 3. Each one was powerful enough to bring down a small tunnel. The creatures moved closer. The stone floor under my feet started to soften, trying to grab my boots. Sarah's stone face seemed to watch me, her frozen expression almost peaceful. I looked up at the natural entrance far above, where the morning sunlight streamed in. The ancient limestone formations there held up tons of rock. If they came down just right. "You've been hiding for thousands of years," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Let's keep it that way." I threw the first charge at the ceiling, then the second, the third. The creatures realized what I was doing too late. They surged forward, but the water from the underground river had spread across the floor, holding them back just long enough. The charges went off with a deafening boom. The ceiling cracked. Ancient stone groaned. The creatures screeched that terrible screech, but this time it wasn't threatening. It was afraid. "Stay buried," I whispered, and ran for the exit tunnel as fast as I could. Behind me, thousands of tons of rock came crashing down. The creatures' screams were cut off as the cave collapsed, sealing them in their tomb of stone. But as I ran, I heard one last whisper in my mind. "We will wait. We will sleep. And when the earth shakes again." That was 3 weeks ago. The official story is that an earthquake caused the cave collapse. They found Sarah and her team still standing like stone statues, but the authorities said it was just limestone deposits on their bodies. Natural causes, they said. Nothing strange about it. They didn't find my camera, or Sarah's notes, or any proof of what really happened down there. Maybe that's for the best. I quit my job as a park ranger the next day. Can't stand being underground anymore. When I close my eyes at night, I still see those star-filled eyes, still feel those needle fingers reaching for me. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what I hear on the news. Small earthquakes in cave systems around the world. Strange. Formations found in deep mines. Spelunkers going missing. And sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet, I press my ear to the ground and listen. Most people would just hear silence. But I know better now. Deep below the earth, in the darkness, where no one goes, there's a sound. Like stone grinding on stone. Like something moving through solid rock. They're down there, waiting, sleeping. And someday they'll wake up again. I just hope I'm not around to see it when they do. Because now I know the truth. We didn't discover them, they let us find them, and next time they won't hide. Story 2: I never should have gone into the forest that morning. But as the senior ranger at Chequamegon Nicolet National Forest, it was my job to check things out when they went wrong. And boy, did things go wrong that day. My name is Frank Peterson, and I've seen some terrible things in my life. Vietnam showed me the worst humans could do to each other. But what I encountered in those woods was something else entirely. Something that shouldn't exist in our world. It started with the meteor shower. I was sitting on my cabin porch that night, sipping coffee and watching the stars fall. Pretty normal stuff. Except these meteors were different. They glowed red instead of white, and they seemed to move slower than usual. I counted 17 of them dropping into the deep forest. The sight made my skin crawl, but I brushed it off. Space rocks were space rocks, right? Wrong. The next morning, I got a call about strange noises coming from the north section. As I grabbed my gear, flashlight, radio, first aid kit, and my trusty machete from Nam, I noticed something odd. The morning mist wasn't its usual gray. It had a pinkish tint, like someone had dropped food coloring into the clouds. I've been a ranger here for 5 years, ever since I came back from the war. I know every trail, every tree, and every animal call in these woods. But as I drove my Jeep down the dirt road that morning, nothing felt familiar. The air was thick and warm, like breathing through a wet blanket. My radio kept crackling with static, even though it was nearly new. The first warning sign came when I spotted a deer standing perfectly still by the roadside. Now, deer usually bolt when they hear a vehicle, but this one just stood there. As I slowed down, my stomach turned. The deer's back half was stuck inside a tree trunk, like they had somehow merged together. Its eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. I'd seen enough death in Nam to know when something was wrong. Real wrong. I grabbed my radio to call it in, but all I got was more static and a weird, wet sound, like someone squishing mud between their fingers. That's when I noticed the trees. In all my years as a ranger, in all my time studying plants and taking care of this forest, I'd never seen anything like it. Red sap was oozing from the bark, thick and dark like blood. And the worst part? The trees were moving, not swaying in. The wind, there wasn't any wind. They were pulsing like they had heartbeats. I touched one of the trunks and my hand came away sticky and warm. The sap wasn't sap at all. It was blood. Real blood. I thought about Jenny, my partner who died in these woods just 3 months ago. They said it was an accident, a fallen tree during a storm. But I found her body and the way that tree had wrapped around her. It wasn't natural. Now, standing here with blood on my hands, I realized her death might have been just the beginning. The forest canopy above me started to close, branches reaching for each other like fingers intertwining. The morning light dimmed, and in the shadows, I swear I saw faces in the moss on the trees, watching me, judging me. I should have turned back, right then. Should have radioed for backup, called in the National Guard, maybe even some scientists. But Jenny deserved answers. And if whatever killed her was still out here, still hunting, then it was my job to stop it. So I gripped my machete tighter, clicked on my flashlight even though it was morning, and stepped deeper into the woods. Into what would become the longest and most horrifying day of my life. And that's saying something because I survived 2 tours in Nam. The deeper I walked into the forest, the quieter things got. Usually these woods are full of noise. Birds chirping, squirrels rustling through leaves, wind in the trees. But now, nothing. Just the sound of my boots crunching on dead leaves and my own breathing. I've worked in this forest long enough to know every kind of plant that grows here. Maple trees, oak, pine. I could name them all in my sleep. But what I saw that morning was different. The plants were changing, right in front of my eyes. I stopped to check a patch of ferns I'd passed. By hundreds of times before, they were growing crazy fast, like someone had hit fast forward on a nature video. The leaves stretched and twisted, reaching toward me like tiny hands. I backed away, but they kept growing, spreading across the ground like spilled water. That's when I heard it, a wet squishing sound coming from behind a large oak tree. The same sound I'd heard on my radio earlier. My hands got sweaty around my machete handle as I walked closer to check it out. I wish I hadn't. There was a raccoon trapped halfway inside the tree trunk, just like the deer I'd seen earlier. But this one was still alive, scratching weakly at the bark with its front paws. The tree seemed to be pulling it in like quicksand. The raccoon's eyes met mine and I swear it was begging for help. I tried to pull it free. I really did. But the more I pulled, the more the tree seemed to tighten its grip. The bark was soft and warm, like skin, and it pulsed under my hands. Before I could do anything else, the raccoon disappeared inside with one final squeak. My stomach turned as I watched the tree trunk smooth over like nothing had happened. Just another normal tree in the forest. Except now, I knew better. I grabbed my radio again, hoping maybe it would work this time. This is Ranger Peterson. I need backup. The static was worse than ever, but under it I heard something else. Words, maybe? No, more like crying. It sounded just like Jenny, I whispered. The crying stopped. The static cleared for just a second, and I heard branches cracking somewhere ahead of me. Something was moving through the forest. I clicked my flashlight on and pointed it between the trees. The beam caught something that made me freeze. The moss on the trees was growing in patterns, forming faces. Not random shapes that kind of looked like faces. Actual faces. Some were screaming, others looked peaceful like they were sleeping. And one looked exactly like Jenny. My hands shook as I touched the moss face that looked like my partner. It was cold and wet, but underneath I felt something solid. Something that wasn't tree bark. I used my machete to carefully scrape away some of the moss. Underneath was smooth, pale skin. human skin. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. The forest was full of bodies. They weren't just inside the trees. They had become part of the trees. Above me, the tree branches were still moving, weaving together to block out more sunlight. The leaves were changing color too, turning from green to deep red, like they were soaked in blood. And they were all pointing the same way, like arrows showing me where to go. My training told me to get out, to call for help. But Jenny's face in the moss kept staring at me. If there was even a small chance she was still alive somehow. Still, trapped in here, I took out my map and marked where I was. The moving branches had turned the forest into a maze, but I still knew these woods. The strange growth seemed to be spreading out from somewhere deeper in, probably near where those meteors fell last night. That's when my flashlight started flickering. New batteries, good bulb. There was no reason for it to be acting up, but in the darkness between flickers I saw something move. Not like a tree or an animal. More like a shadow, but one that moved on its own. The air got thicker, harder to breathe. It smelled like rotting leaves and copper, like blood. Every part of me screamed to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed answers, so I did what any good ranger would do. I started taking notes, writing down everything I saw in my little waterproof notebook. If something happened to me in here, at least others would know what they were dealing with. I checked my watch, 9:47 a.m. The sun should have been high enough to light up the whole forest by now, but it felt more like twilight under the twisted canopy. As I wrote the time in my notebook, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The paper was damp, not with water, but with that same red sap from the trees. It was seeping up through the pages like the book was bleeding. Whatever was happening in this forest, it wasn't just affecting the plants and animals anymore. It was spreading, changing everything it touched, and I was right in the middle of it. The bleeding notebook reminded me of something from Vietnam. We'd been in the jungle for days when our maps started falling apart from the humidity. But this was different. This wasn't just paper getting wet. It was like the forest itself was trying to tell me something. I ripped out a clean page and wrote, "If anyone finds this, stay out. Something wrong in Chequamegon Forest. Not natural." I folded it and stuck it under a rock near the trail. At least if things went bad, there'd be a warning. As I walked deeper into the woods, memories from Nam kept floating back. The way the jungle would go quiet before an ambush. How you'd learn to spot things that didn't belong. Right now, everything felt wrong, but in a way I'd never seen before. My radio crackled again. This time I heard something clearer through the static. "Help, Sector 7. Multiple trapped Sector 7. That's where Jenny died 3 months ago. Also where most of those red meteors fell last night. Not a coincidence, I bet." I checked my compass to get my bearings, but the needle was spinning like crazy. Great. I'd have to navigate the old way, using the sun, except I could barely see it through the twisted canopy above. The branches were so tightly woven now, they looked like a giant net ready to drop. That's when I heard someone crying. "Hello?" I called out, not too loud. In Nam, making noise could get you killed. Same rule seemed smart here. "This is Ranger Peterson. Anyone there?" The crying stopped. Then came a sound like footsteps on wet leaves, moving away from me. I followed, keeping my machete ready. The forest floor was different now. The ground felt spongy under my boots, like walking on a giant mushroom. With each step, little ripples spread out through the soil, making the plants around me twitch. Something white caught my eye. A piece of cloth stuck to a tree. I got closer and my throat went tight. It was from a ranger uniform. Jenny's uniform. Still had her name tag on. But that wasn't possible. We'd found her whole uniform with her body. I'd seen it, unless a branch snapped behind me. I spun around, machete raised, but what I saw made me drop it. Jenny was standing there, just standing between the trees, wearing her ranger uniform. But something was wrong. Her skin was pale green like moss, and her eyes were pure black like holes in her face. "Jenny?" My voice came out shaky. "That really you?" She smiled, but not like Jenny used to smile. This smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. "Frank," she said, but her voice sounded wrong, like multiple voices talking at once. "You finally came to help us grow. I've seen some scary things in my life, but watching your dead partner talk to you with a voice that isn't hers, that's a whole new level of wrong." She took a step toward me. Where her boots touched the ground, plants burst up through the soil, growing and twisting like time-lapse photography. "Stop right there," I said, picking up my machete. My hands were shaking. "You're not Jenny. What are you?" She tilted her head, at an angle no human neck could make. "We are the forest now, Frank, all of us. The meteors woke us up, made us better, stronger." She reached out one hand. Her fingers were too long and they moved like vines. "Join us, like Jenny did." That hit me hard. "Jenny didn't join you. You killed her." "No, Frank, we saved her, made her part of something bigger, like the others." "Others?" She gestured around us. The faces in the moss seemed to move, watching us. I recognized some of them. Hikers who'd gone missing over the years. Campers who were never found. My mind went back to all those missing persons reports. How many people had this thing taken? How long had it been here, waiting for those meteors to wake it up? I gripped my machete tighter. The thing wearing Jenny's face was still talking, still trying to convince me, but under its words, I heard something else. A wet, slithering sound. Coming from behind me, I glanced back. Roots were rising from the ground like snakes trying to circle around my feet. The thing that looked like Jenny was just keeping me distracted while the forest itself tried to trap me. Time to move. I swung my machete down hard, cutting through the roots. They leaked that same red sap, blood, and made a sound like screaming. But Jenny's smile disappeared. "That was a mistake," she said, her voice getting deeper, rougher. Her skin started to ripple, like something was moving underneath it. "We gave you a choice, Frank. Now you get to join us the hard way." The ground erupted around me. Roots shot up like spears trying to grab me. I slashed and dodged, remembering all those jungle training exercises. Never thought I'd be using those skills against plants. I ran, not proud of it, but sometimes running is the smart move. I could hear not Jenny behind me, her footsteps changing into something that sounded bigger, heavier. The whole forest seemed to come alive, branches reaching for me, roots trying to trip me. But I had one advantage. I knew these woods better than anyone. Even with all the changes, I could feel where the old trails should be. I just needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere I could think and figure out what to do next. That's when I remembered the old fire watch tower. Steel and concrete, not wood. If anywhere in this forest was safe from whatever this thing was, that would be it. As I ran, I could still hear not Jenny's voice, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You can't hide from us, Frank. We are the forest. And the forest is growing. Running through a normal forest is hard enough. Running through a forest that's trying to catch you, that's a whole other thing. Every few steps, roots would burst from the ground, trying to grab my ankles. Branches whipped down at my face. Even the moss seemed to reach for me as I passed. My machete arm was getting tired from all the cutting. I could hear it behind me. Whatever that thing pretending to be Jenny had turned into. The footsteps sounded huge now, making the ground shake. But I didn't look back. In Nam, we learned that looking back only slows you down. The old watchtower was about a mile away. Normally I could run that in about 10 minutes. But the forest wasn't making it easy. The trees were moving, shifting position to block my path. It was like trying to run through a maze that kept changing. My radio squawked to life again. Frank. Coming everywhere. It wasn't Jenny's voice this time. It sounded like Bill, one of the other rangers. But I couldn't tell if it was really him or another trick. I had to stop for a second to catch my breath. Bad mistake. The ground under my feet started to feel weird, like quicksand. I looked down and saw the dirt was turning dark and wet, trying to suck me in. I grabbed a nearby branch to pull myself out, then remembered too late that touching the trees was a bad idea. The branch wrapped around my wrist like a snake. "Come on," I grunted, hacking at it with my machete. The branch bled, that red sap, but it kept trying to hold on. I could feel it trying to pull me into the trunk, just like that raccoon. Finally, the branch broke. I stumbled back, breathing hard. That's when I saw something that made my heart stop. There was another ranger uniform hanging from a tree ahead. To me, this one was fresh, still had the radio clipped to it. Bill's radio. The thing behind me was getting closer. I could hear trees cracking as it moved. But I had to check that uniform. I ran over and grabbed the radio. There was blood on it, real human blood, not that tree sap stuff. The uniform was torn up bad. Poor Bill. He must have come looking for me when I didn't check in. I clipped his radio to my belt next to mine. Maybe between the two of them I could get a clear signal for help, if there was anyone left to help. The footsteps behind me stopped. That was worse than hearing them. Now I didn't know where the thing was. I started moving again, faster this time. The watchtower was close. I could see bits of it through the trees when the branches shifted the right way. Its metal frame looked like the most beautiful thing in the world right then. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I spun around, machete ready. It was a kid's backpack hanging from a branch, bright blue with superhero stickers on it. My stomach turned as I recognized it. It belonged to that missing kid from last week, the one we'd been searching for. Now, I knew why we never found him. More stuff started appearing in the trees as I walked. A camping tent ripped to shreds, a camera, a hiking boot with the laces still tied, all things that belonged to missing people. The forest was showing me its collection, like it was proud. Then I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A kid crying. "Hello?" a small voice called out. "Is someone there? I'm stuck." It came from somewhere to my left. Everything in me screamed that it was a trap. The forest was using the missing kid's voice just like it had used Jenny's. But what if I was wrong? What if the kid was still alive somehow? "Keep making noise," I shouted. "I'll find you." I followed the crying, moving careful and quiet. The forest had gone still again, like it was holding its breath. Through the trees, I saw a small figure curled, up against a log. The blue backpack I'd seen earlier was on the ground next to it. I got closer, machete ready. "Hey there, I'm Ranger Peterson. I'm here to help." The figure didn't move, just kept crying. 3 more steps and I'd reach it. 2 more steps. 1. The crying stopped. The figure slowly turned its head, all the way around like an owl. Its face was blank, smooth wood where features should be. Trap. I spun around just as the real attack came from behind. A massive wall of twisted trees and vines shaped almost like a hand swung down at me. I dove and rolled, feeling it brush past my back. When I got up running, I saw what was chasing me now. The thing that used to look like Jenny had changed. It was huge, like 3 trees twisted together into a shape that was almost human. Waves of red sap poured down its bark-like skin. Where its face should be, there was just a dark hole with Jenny's ranger's badge stuck in it. The watchtower was right there, maybe 50 yards away. But the forest between me and it was thick with grabbed a fistful of vines, everything alive and hungry. I heard both radios suddenly buzz with static. Through the noise, I made out words coming from the thing behind me. Not Jenny's voice anymore, but something deeper, older. "The forest has been waiting so long, Frank, waiting for the right food to help us grow, to help us spread." I gripped my machete tighter and looked at the watchtower. 50 yards through hell, time to move. 50 yards. Just 50 yards to the watchtower. But those 50 yards looked like something from my worst nightmares. I took a deep breath and thought about Jenny, the real Jenny, not that thing wearing her face. I remembered the day she first showed me around this forest. "You have to respect it, Frank," she'd said. "The forest isn't just trees and dirt, it's alive, it remembers." Turns out she was more right than anyone knew. I checked my machete. The blade was getting dull from all the cutting. The 2 radios on my belt were still spitting static, and my flashlight was flickering worse than ever. The giant tree thing that used to be Jenny crashed closer. "Remember how she died, Frank?" it said in that deep, wrong voice. "How the tree fell so perfectly. We chose her. Just like we chose the others. Just like we chose you. That hit me like a punch to the gut. All those times I'd wondered about Jenny's death. How a perfectly healthy tree just happened to fall right on her during a tiny storm. Now I knew. It wasn't an accident, it was murder. I started running. Not blindly, you can't do that in Nam, and you sure couldn't do it here. I zigzagged between the trees, cutting only what I had to. The ground was getting wetter, mushier, trying to slow me down. 30 yards to go. A root caught my foot and I fell hard. Both radios went flying. As I pushed myself up, I saw something in the wet ground. A hand. A human hand, mostly turned to wood, reaching up like it was frozen while trying to climb out. I scrambled back, my heart pounding. The forest floor was full of them. Hands, faces, bodies, all slowly turning into roots and wood. All the missing people. All becoming part of the forest. 20 yards. The thing behind me roared, a sound like trees breaking in a storm. More roots burst from the ground, but these weren't trying to grab me. They were joining together, building something. They formed. A wall of twisted wood and bodies blocking my path to the watchtower. In the wall, faces pushed out of the bark. Bill, the missing kid, hikers, campers. All of them with their eyes closed like they were sleeping. "They're not dead, Frank," the forest thing said. "They're part of us now. Growing, changing, becoming something better." 10 yards to the wall. I saw Jenny's real face in the wall too, peaceful like she was dreaming. Part of me wanted to stop, to try and save her. But I knew that wasn't really Jenny anymore. Just like that thing behind me wasn't really her. The forest thing was almost on me. I could smell it. Rot and blood and something else. Something that reminded me of those red meteors. That's when I remembered something else Jenny told me, back when she was teaching me about the forest. Everything grows in cycles, Frank. Even the bad stuff. You just have to wait for the right moment, then cut it back. I looked at my machete, then at the wall, then at my flashlight that was still flickering. The wall was made of wood. Wood burns. I had a lighter in my pocket. All rangers carry one for emergencies. And my flashlight was acting up because something in the forest was messing with electricity. Making energy go weird. Maybe making things more likely to spark. "Want me?" I shouted at the forest thing. "Come get me!" I turned and ran straight at the wall. Behind me, I heard the thing charge. The ground shook with each step. 5 yards. I grabbed my flickering flashlight in one hand, lighter in the other. 3 yards. I could feel the forest thing right behind me, reaching with its huge wooden hands. 1 yard. Time to find out if I was right about the energy in this place. I threw the flashlight hard at the wall and clicked the lighter. "I'm sorry, Jenny," I whispered. And then everything exploded. The explosion was bigger than I expected. Way bigger. My flashlight hit the wall and burst like a grenade. Blue sparks flew everywhere, catching on the wet wood. But instead of putting the fire out, the red sap made it spread faster. Within seconds, the whole wall was burning with weird blue and red flames. The forest thing screamed. Not like a person screams, like 1,000 trees splitting apart all at once. The sound hurt my ears so bad I thought they might bleed. I ran straight through the burning wall where it was weakest. The heat was intense, but I'd learned in Nam that sometimes you have to run through fire to survive. My jacket caught some flames and I rolled on the ground, putting them out quick. When I got up, I saw what the explosion had done. The wall was completely on fire now, making a line between me and the forest thing. The faces in the wood were gone, either burned away or pulled back inside. The flames were spreading to nearby trees, all burning with that strange blue color. "You hurt us!" the forest thing roared. Tried to reach through the fire but pulled back when its wooden arms started burning. "You hurt your own kind!" "They're not my kind," I said, backing toward the watchtower. "And they're not yours either. You stole them." Finally, I reached the tower's metal door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the lock, but I got it open. I slipped inside just as the forest thing threw a burning log at me. It hit the door with a huge bang. The watchtower was 4 stories of solid metal and concrete. No wood anywhere. As I ran up the stairs, I could hear the forest thing throwing itself against the base, trying to break in. But this tower was built to last. The whole structure shook, but it held. I reached the top floor, breathing hard. Up here I could see the whole forest. What I saw made my blood run cold. The strange growth wasn't just in this area. It was spreading out in circles like ripples in a pond. The red meteors had started it, but now it was moving on its own. In a few hours, it would reach the town. By tomorrow, maybe the whole state. The forest thing hit the tower again. Metal groaned. I had to think fast. I grabbed the tower's radio set, bigger and more powerful than my handheld ones. But when I tried it, all I got was that same static. Then through the noise I heard voices. Lots of voices, all talking at once. All belonging to people I knew were dead. I ripped the radio's panel open, trying to fix it. Inside, the wires were covered in red sap. Somehow the forest was even getting into the electronics. Another hit from below. A big one. The whole tower leaned to one side for a second. I looked out the window and saw something that turned my stomach. The forest thing wasn't just hitting the tower anymore. It was growing around it. Huge wooden tentacles were wrapping around the metal frame, squeezing. Where they touched, the metal started to rust and crumble. I had maybe minutes before the whole thing came down. That's when I noticed something on the desk. An old folder marked 1947 incident. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, a report about another meteor shower, one that happened right here, 78 years ago. My hands shook as I read it. Back then, the same thing started happening. Trees moving, people disappearing, but they stopped it. How? The last page had my answer. It was a hand-drawn map showing 7 spots in the forest marked with red X's. The spots where the meteors had landed. Under the map was a note. Burn the roots. All of them. It's the only way. The tower shook again. Through the window I saw more of those giant wooden tentacles climbing up. The forest thing's face, still with Jenny's badge stuck in that dark hole, rose up to look at me. "The forest remembers you, Frank," it said. "Remembers all of you. The ones who burned us before, but we came back, we always come back." I looked at the map again. The 7 spots formed a circle. Just like the ripples of weird growth I could see now. The meteors weren't random. They were planted somehow, like seeds. The tower groaned and shifted. Metal started tearing. I didn't have much time. I pulled out my lighter again. The folder was old and dry, perfect kindling. I lit it and held it up so the forest thing could see. "You're right," I said. "The forest remembers, but so do we." Its dark hollow of a face got wider, like it was trying to smile. "Burning one piece of paper won't stop us." "No," I agreed. "But burning 7 special trees might." The smile disappeared. The tentacles stopped moving for just a second. That's when I knew I was right. Those 7 spots on the map, they weren't just where the meteors landed. They were where the first trees got infected. The parent trees. Cut them off, and maybe the whole thing would die. The forest thing smashed against the tower again, harder than ever. The floor under me started to tilt. I had the map, I had my lighter. I even still had my machete. But first, I had to get down from this tower before it fell. And the only way down was through a very angry forest. The tower was going to fall any second. I could hear the metal beams bending, screaming as the forest thing's wooden tentacles crushed them. I had to move fast. I stuffed the map in my pocket and looked around the room. In Nam, we learned to use whatever we had. Right now I had a metal desk, some old chairs, and about 50 feet of heavy-duty power cable that connected to the radio tower outside. An idea hit me. Crazy, but better than nothing. I grabbed the power cable and tied it to the desk, making sure the knots were tight. Then I dragged the desk to the window facing away from the forest thing. Looking down, I saw fewer tentacles on this side, maybe enough space to... The tower lurched hard. A chunk of wall ripped away behind me. Through the hole, I saw the forest thing's face, dark and angry. "Found you," it growled. No more time to think. I jumped onto the desk and kicked it out the window, holding tight to the cable. The desk fell, taking me with it. For a second, I was flying through the air, the cable spinning out behind me. Then physics kicked in. The desk swung like a pendulum, away from the tower. I let go at just the right moment, something I'd learned from training jumps in Nam. I hit the ground, rolling. It hurt, but nothing broke. Behind me, the tower finally gave up. Metal screamed one last time as the whole thing collapsed. The forest thing roared in triumph, but I was already running. The map showed the nearest meteor site was about half a mile east. The tree there would be different from the others, bigger, darker, more wrong. The forest tried to stop me. Roots grabbed at my feet. Branches whipped at my face, but I kept going, following the map and my ranger's knowledge of the land. Then I saw it. A tree that looked like it came straight from hell. Its trunk was huge, twisted like a spiral. Red sap poured down its bark like it was bleeding. The ground around it was black and dead. Nothing growing there at all. The parent tree. The first one infected by the meteor. I ran toward it, lighter in one hand, machete in the other. Behind me, the forest thing was coming, shaking the ground with each step. But it sounded scared now. "Stop him!" it roared. The whole forest seemed to move at once, everything trying to grab me. I reached the tree. Up close, I could see faces moving under its bark, trying to get out. The trunk was warm, like it had a fever. "This is for Jenny," I said, and swung my machete. The blade bit deep into the trunk. Red sap gushed out, splashing my arms. The tree made a sound like a scream. I hacked again and again, cutting through the wood. Each hit made the faces in the bark scream louder. The forest around me went crazy, everything moving, trying to stop me. But I kept cutting until I reached the center of the trunk. Inside was something that glowed red, a piece of the meteor pulsing like a heart. I grabbed my lighter, clicked it on, and touched it to the red sap pouring from the cuts. The stuff caught fire instantly, burning blue and hot. The forest thing reached me just then, its huge wooden hands grabbing for me. But it was too late. The fire raced up the parent tree like it was covered in gasoline. The meteor heart inside exploded with a sound like a bomb going off. And everything, the tree, the forest thing, all of it, started to scream. The bad news? This was just one parent tree. The good news? Now I knew how to kill them. 6 more to go, and the sun wasn't down. It took me until sunset to find and burn all 7 parent trees. Each one fought back harder than the last. Each one screamed when it died. By the time I burned the final tree, my ranger uniform was torn to shreds. I was bleeding from about 20 places, and I'd lost my machete somewhere along the way. But I'd won. As the last meteor heart exploded, something changed in the forest. The twisted trees started falling apart. The faces in the bark faded away. That weird red sap dried up and turned to normal tree sap again. They found me walking out of the woods around midnight. The rescue team said I wasn't making much sense talking about moving trees and people trapped in wood. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't explain the burned circles where the parent trees had been. Or the weird metal pieces they found in the ashes, fragments of those red meteors, or all the missing people's belongings scattered through the forest. They cleaned up the woods, cut down the dead trees, and planted new ones. Life went back to normal mostly. But sometimes, late at night when I'm on patrol, I swear I can hear the trees whispering. And every now and then I see a face in the moss just for a second, then it's gone. Because the forest remembers, and somewhere up there, more red meteors are waiting to fall. Story 3. The day the trees started moving was the day I should have quit my job. But 15 years as a park ranger teaches you to trust your gut. And my gut was screaming that if I didn't stay, people would die. I remember it clearly. November 12, 1979. The first snow of the season was falling over Bridger Teton National Forest, my home away from home. I'm Bob Mitchell, and at 39 years old, I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Boy, was I wrong. That morning started like any other patrol. I grabbed my thermos of coffee, checked my radio, and hopped into my forest service truck. The heater was fighting a losing battle against the Wyoming cold. and my breath came out in little white puffs as I drove along the narrow forest road. The snow was coming down in those big, lazy flakes that make everything quiet. You know the kind, where the whole world feels wrapped in cotton. But something wasn't right. I first noticed it near Old Creek Trail. The pine trees were swaying, their branches moving like slow dancers. Nothing strange about that, except there wasn't any wind, not a breath. The air was dead still, yet these trees were moving like they were in a gentle breeze. I pulled over and killed the engine. In 15 years, I'd learned to trust silence as much as my own eyes. The forest has a way of talking to you, if you know how to listen. But this morning, it was telling me something I'd never heard before. Grabbing my flashlight and patrol kit, I stepped out into the snow. The crunch under my boots should have been the loudest sound around, but it wasn't. There was this whisper, like pine needles rustling, but wrong somehow. Just wrong. That's when I saw the second strange thing. The forest floor. It was clean. Too clean. Anyone who knows forests knows they're messy places. There should have been fallen branches, old pine cones, dead leaves, the usual debris. But here, nothing. The ground was bare except for a perfect blanket of fresh snow. "Base, this is Mitchell." I spoke into my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. "You seeing any unusual weather patterns on radar?" The radio crackled. "Negative, Bob. Clear systems all around, just the usual snowfall. Everything okay out there?" I looked at the swaying trees again. "Not sure yet. I'm going to check something." Out near Old Creek. As I walked deeper into the forest, the snow started doing something that made my skin crawl. It was melting in perfect circles, like someone had taken a giant cookie cutter to the ground. Each circle was exactly the same size, spaced exactly the same distance apart. Nature doesn't work like that. Nature doesn't do perfect. The temperature gauge on my watch read 28 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing. But when I touched one of the pine trees, sticky sap was flowing freely down its bark. In winter, sap should be sluggish, barely moving. This was running like it was middle of summer. My radio crackled again, making me jump. "Bob, Linda Hayes from the Botanical Research Station. We're picking up some odd readings from your sector. Mind if I join you?" I almost said no. Looking back, I wish I had. But having a scientist's eyes on this mess seemed smart at the time. "Come on up, Linda, but bring your winter gear." And I hesitated, not wanting to sound crazy. "Bring your camera. There's something you need to see." While waiting for Linda, I noticed something else that set off every alarm bell in my ranger's toolkit. The birds were avoiding a particular grove of pines about 100 yards east. Now, birds aren't stupid. If they're staying away from somewhere, there's usually a good reason. I'd seen bears, mountain lions, all sorts of predators in my time, but I'd never seen wildlife act quite like this. They weren't just avoiding the area. They were pretending it didn't exist, like their eyes just slid right past it. The snow was falling harder now, but it wasn't building up on those trees. It was like they were giving off heat, but when I checked with my infrared thermometer, they read colder than the surrounding air. That's not possible. That's not how temperature works. I heard Linda's SUV before I saw it, the crunching of snow under tires breaking the unnatural quiet. As she parked and started unloading her equipment, I kept my eyes on those trees. They were still swaying, still moving without wind. "Bob?" Linda called out, her voice carrying in the still air. "What are we looking at here?" I turned to answer her, and that's when I saw it. One of the trees, and I know how crazy this sounds, one of the trees had changed position. Not fallen, not bent. It had moved, like taking a step. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I think we're looking at something that's going to change everything we know about this forest." The snow kept falling, but now it was different. The flakes weren't random anymore. They were falling, in perfect geometric patterns like someone had programmed them. And as I watched, the trees swayed closer, their branches reaching out like fingers. That's when I knew. This wasn't just strange weather or unusual natural phenomena. Something was waking up in my forest. Something old. Something that had been waiting, and it knew we were watching. Linda stood next to me, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. She was wearing her usual practical outfit, thick winter coat, hiking boots, and a wool hat pulled down over her graying hair. The scientific equipment she'd brought looked out of place in this ancient forest. "I've never seen anything like this, Bob," she said quietly, adjusting her glasses as she stared at the grove. "Those growth patterns, they're all wrong." She was right. The young saplings near the edge of the grove were growing in ways that made no sense. Normal pine trees grow straight up, reaching for sunlight. But these? They were growing in spirals, their trunks twisted like corkscrews. Some had branches that crossed over each other to make perfect squares and triangles. "How long has this been going on?" Linda asked, taking photos with her Polaroid camera. The familiar whir and click of the camera was comforting in the strange silence. "First time I've seen it," I said, keeping my voice low. Something about this place made me want to whisper. "But look at the size of those saplings. They're too big for their age. Way too big." Linda pulled out a measuring tape and carefully approached one of the twisted trees. I wanted to tell her to stay back, but I knew she'd think I was being silly. Scientists need their proof. "Bob, this sapling, according to its rings, it should be 2 years old. But it's the size of a 10-year-old tree." She ran her hand along the twisted bark. "And feel this, it's warm." I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in my truck and drive away. But I was a ranger. This was my forest. I had to know what was happening. The bark was warm, like Linda said. Not just warm, it felt alive in a way trees shouldn't. Like there was a pulse under the surface. I pulled my hand back quickly, trying to hide how much it bothered me. "There's something else," Linda said, pointing to the ground. "Look at how the roots are growing." I knelt down where the snow had melted in those perfect circles. The roots weren't spreading out like they should. Instead, they were growing straight down, like fingers digging into the earth. Some of them were moving slightly, just enough to notice if you were really looking. "We need to take samples," Linda said, pulling equipment from her bag. "Core samples from the trunks, soil samples, maybe some root tissue." A crack echoed through the forest, sharp as a gunshot. We both jumped. One of the larger pines at the edge of the grove had shifted. Its trunk was now at a different angle, leaning toward us just slightly. But trees don't move like that. They can't. "Linda," I said carefully, "I think we should back away." Slowly. She was still staring at the tree, her scientific curiosity fighting with basic survival instincts. "But the samples, later," I said, firmly putting my hand on her shoulder. "Something's not right here." As if to prove my point, a low groaning sound filled the air. It was coming from underground, like something deep below was stretching after a long sleep. The snow around our feet started to melt faster, those perfect circles joining together into bigger shapes. We backed away step by step. I could feel Linda trembling slightly under my hand, but she kept taking pictures. The clicking of her camera seemed to aggravate whatever was happening. With each flash, the trees swayed more violently. When we were about 50 feet from the grove, Linda stopped. "Bob, look at this." She was holding up the Polaroid photos as they developed. My stomach turned. In each picture, the trees were in different positions, not just swaying, completely different spots. And in the last photo, there was something else. Something standing between the trees. Something tall and thin that looked like a tree but wasn't. "We need to call this in," Linda said, her scientist's calm cracking a little. "The university, the Forest Service, someone needs to study this." Another crack, louder this time. 2 more trees had moved, and now they were definitely closer than before. The groaning sound got louder, and I could feel it in my chest like a bass drum. "First, we need to get somewhere safe," I said. "Document everything from a distance. Then we call for backup." Linda nodded, but she was still taking pictures. The flash lit up the grove one last time, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the trees had turned to face us. Not bent, not fallen, turned. Like a person turning their head to watch something. We walked backwards to our vehicles, not daring to turn our backs on the grove. The snow was falling in geometric patterns again, making perfect shapes around the trees. The air felt thick, like breathing through syrup. Back at our vehicles, Linda's hands were shaking as she packed up her camera. "Bob," she said quietly, "what do we do if they follow us?" I looked back at the grove. In the 10 minutes we'd been watching, every single tree had turned to face us. Their branches reached out like arms, and the gaps between them looked like dark, hungry mouths. "They're trees," I said, trying to convince myself more than her. "They can't follow us." But even as I said it, I heard that underground groaning. Again, and this time it sounded like laughter. I started my truck while Linda got in her SUV. The sun was setting now, making long shadows that seemed to reach for us like fingers. As we drove away, I kept checking my mirror. The trees weren't in the same places anymore. And if you looked carefully, you could see the snow being disturbed in long lines like footprints. Like something was walking through the forest. Something that shouldn't be able to walk at all. The ranger station was warm and bright, but it didn't make me feel any safer. Linda spread her Polaroid photos across my desk while I tried to radio for help. The storm that hadn't been there an hour ago was now blocking all signals. "Bob, look at these pictures again," Linda said, her finger trembling as she pointed. "Each time we took a photo, they got closer. They were hunting us." I didn't want to look at the photos, but I had to. The sequence was clear. Picture after picture showing the trees moving closer, their branches reaching out like clawed hands. The last photo showed something else, something that made my hands shake. A tall, thin shape that looked like a tree but stood like a person. "We need to warn people," I said, trying the radio again. Just static. "Get the hiking trails closed. Call in some experts." A sharp tap on the window made us both jump. It was just a branch hitting the glass blown by the wind. But when I looked closer, I realized there wasn't any wind. The branch was moving on its own, tapping like a finger asking to be let in. "The animals," Linda whispered suddenly. "We need to check on the wildlife cameras." Something was wrong with the animals near that grove. She was right. I'd been so focused on the trees that I'd forgotten about how strange the animals were acting. We kept motion-activated cameras around the forest to track wildlife movements. If something weird was happening, those cameras would have caught it. The camera footage was stored in the station's small computer room. As we walked down the dark hallway, the tapping followed us, moving from window to window. I tried not to look. The footage started normally enough. Deer walking, bears searching for food before winter, the usual forest life. But then things got strange. The animals were moving in patterns, just like the snow had been. Deer walking in perfect circles, birds flying in triangles, a whole pack of wolves standing completely still, all facing the same direction. "Stop the tape," Linda said suddenly. "Go back." I rewound the footage. There, in the background of one shot, a group of trees where trees shouldn't be. They hadn't been there the day before. "They're spreading," I said quietly, moving to new areas of the forest. A loud crash from outside made us run to the window. One of the oldest pines near the station had fallen. No, not fallen. Moved. It was walking, its roots pulling up from the ground like legs, its trunk bending like a spine. And it wasn't alone. "The storage shed," Linda gasped. "My samples are in there." Before I could stop her, she was running for the door. I chased after her, shouting for her to wait, but she was already halfway to the shed. The walking tree noticed her. It turned, really turned, like a person hearing a noise. Its branches reached out. "Linda, run!" I screamed. She saw it coming and tried to turn back, but another tree was behind her. They were moving fast now, much faster than before. Their branches were like arms with too many fingers, all reaching for her. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran to my truck, grabbed the emergency flare gun, and fired. The red light blazed through the darkness, and the trees, they screamed. Not like wood creaking or branches breaking, but a real scream. They pulled back from the light, giving Linda enough time to run back to the station. We slammed the door, shut and locked it, both breathing hard. Linda was crying, but quietly, like she was trying to hide it. "The samples," she said between breaths. I saw them in the shed. The tree cores, the roots we collected. They're all wrong. The rings aren't rings anymore. They're symbols, like a language. Another crash outside. More trees were uprooting themselves. Through the windows we could see them forming a circle around the station. Their branches were weaving together, making walls. They were trapping us in. The old records, I said suddenly, remembering something. There's a file room in the basement, articles going back to when the park was founded. Maybe this happened before. Linda nodded, wiping her eyes. We need to understand what we're dealing with. These aren't just trees anymore. The power went out as we headed to the basement, leaving us with just our flashlights. The tapping on the windows was getting louder, more insistent, like they knew what we were trying to do. The file room was small and dusty, filled with boxes of old reports and newspapers. We started searching, trying to ignore the sounds from above. The trees were on the roof now. We could hear their roots scratching against the shingles. Here, Linda pulled out a yellowed newspaper from 1932. The headline read, "Forest Service loses contact with Bridger Teton Station. 3 rangers missing." Below it was a photo that made my skin crawl. Trees in a circle just like outside, and in the middle a tall, thin shape. More articles painted a pattern. Every 47 years, almost to the day, strange things happened in this part of the forest. People went missing. Trees moved. Animals acted weird. And then it would all stop, like nothing had happened. "Bob," Linda said, her flashlight beam shaking. "The last time was 1932, that was 47 years ago." The scratching above us stopped. In the sudden silence, we heard something new. Footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps moving across the roof. But not like a person walking, like a tree walking. "The old articles," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Did they say how they stopped it?" Linda shook her head. "Nobody stopped it, it just went back to sleep after it took what it wanted." "What did it want?" Before she could answer, my flashlight caught something on the wall. A very old photo, black and white, showing a group of Native Americans standing in front of the forest. They were holding torches, and the trees behind them were backing away from the fire. Under the photo was a note. "The people's warning. Do not let it walk. When the forest stands up, bring the sun to the heart of the grove." The footsteps were inside the station now, coming down the stairs. Something was walking on too many legs, dragging branches against the walls. Getting closer. Linda gripped my arm. "Bob, what's the heart of the grove?" I thought about the strange trees we'd seen earlier, how they formed a perfect circle. "I think I know, but we'll have to go back out there." The basement door creaked open. Our flashlights showed empty darkness beyond, but something was there. Something tall and thin that looked like a tree but wasn't, and it was waiting for us. We had 2 flares left, a box of matches, and a crazy idea that might get us killed. But as we huddled in that dark basement, listening to that thing coming, down the stairs we didn't have much choice. I raised my flare gun, aiming at the doorway. The footsteps got closer. That weird sound of wood scraping on wood, like a puppet made of trees. Linda's hand found mine in the dark and squeezed. The thing that came through the door wasn't exactly a tree, but it wasn't exactly not a tree either. It was tall, its body made of twisted branches and bark, with a face that looked like knots in wood. Where its eyes should be, there were just dark holes with a faint green glow deep inside. I fired the flare. The basement lit up bright red, and the tree thing jerked back with that awful screaming sound. We ran past it, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Behind us, we could hear it recovering, following. "The old photo," Linda shouted as we ran. Those weren't just torches the Native Americans were holding. They were burning something special, some kind of herb or wood. We burst out of the station into the snowy night. The walking trees had made a wall around us, their branches woven together like a fence. But they weren't attacking. They were waiting, watching. "The ranger's cabin," I gasped. "Old Joe, the ranger who retired last year. He was friends with the tribal elders. He kept journals about their stories. Maybe there's something—" "Bob, look!" Linda pointed at the ground. The snow was melting in a pattern again, but this time it was making words. Ancient words, written in a language I'd never seen before, but somehow I could read them. "The walker comes when the forest remembers," I read out loud. "It wakes to reclaim what was taken." The words kept appearing in the snow, telling a story older than the park itself. Long ago, this forest had been sacred ground. The trees, here weren't just trees. They were guardians protecting something precious buried deep in the earth. But when settlers came and started cutting down the forest, they woke something up, something angry. Every 47 years, when the stars aligned just right, the walker would wake up. It would possess the trees, make them walk, try to take back what was lost. The only way to stop it was to put it back to sleep, with a special ceremony that needed sacred smoke from burning specific plants. "Joe's cabin," Linda said urgently. "It's just past that line of trees. If his journals tell us what plants we need..." A cracking sound interrupted her. The tree thing was coming out of the station, its wooden body twisting in ways that hurt to look at. The other trees parted to let it through, bowing like subjects before a king. We ran. The wall of trees opened for us too, not to help us, but like a cat letting mice run before pouncing. Behind us, the walker started to sing. The sound was beautiful and horrible, like wind through branches mixed with screaming. Joe's cabin was dark and cold, but it was unlocked. We rushed inside, slamming the door just as the first walking trees reached us. Their branches started tapping on the windows, trying to find a way in. "Look for anything about tribal ceremonies," I said, pulling out drawers and checking shelves. "Burning herbs, sacred smoke, anything." Linda found the journals in an old trunk. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, the tapping on the windows getting louder and louder. "Here," she said. "Joe wrote about a ceremony. They used 3 things: sage, sweetgrass, and pine needles. But not just any pine needles. They had to come from the heart tree. The heart tree. The oldest tree in the grove. The first one that the walker possesses. That's why it forms that circle. All the trees point to the heart tree." The windows started to crack. Outside, the walker's song was getting closer. Linda kept reading. "The smoke has to reach the walker's eyes, those green lights we saw. It's not really a tree spirit, Bob. It's something else, something that uses the trees like we use clothes. If we can make it breathe the sacred smoke, it'll have to leave the trees," I finished. "Go back to sleep." The door burst open. The walker stood there, its wooden face twisted in what might have been a smile. Behind it, our watched trees swayed, ready to grab us. But now we knew what to do. We knew what it really was, and we knew how to stop it. "Linda," I said quietly, feeling for the last flare in my pocket, "we need to get back to that grove." The walker reached for us with its branch fingers, green fire glowing in its eyes. Time to run again. Running through a dark forest is scary enough. Running through a dark forest where the trees can grab you, that's something else entirely. Linda and I sprinted between the walking trees, ducking under reaching branches and jumping over root legs that tried to trip us. The walker was right, behind us, but it wasn't trying very hard to catch us. It was having fun, like a cat playing with mice. "There," Linda pointed ahead. "The grove." She was right. Through the darkness, I could see that perfect circle of trees. They were all facing inward now, pointing at the biggest pine I'd ever seen. The heart tree. Its trunk was wider than my truck, and those strange symbols we'd seen in the tree rings were glowing green on its bark. "The sage and sweetgrass," Linda gasped as we ran. "They're in my sample bag back at the station." "No time," I said. "Look!" The snow was melting again, making words. "The heart tree's needles are enough if paid for in blood freely given." "Freely given," Linda repeated. "Bob, it has to be a sacrifice. Someone has to choose to..." "I know." I gripped the last flare, tighter. "Get ready to run to the station when I tell you." Linda grabbed my arm. "No! There has to be another way." But there wasn't. The walker was getting closer, and the moving trees were closing in around us. In the moonlight, I could see more trees in the distance starting to pull their roots free. Soon, the whole forest would be walking. I took a deep breath. Linda, you're the scientist. You can explain what happened here. Make sure people are ready next time. In 47 years, when it wakes up again. Bob, please, run. Now! I shoved her away and ran straight at the heart tree. Behind me, I heard the walker's song change. From playful to angry, it knew what I was trying to do. Branches whipped at my face as I ran, but I didn't stop. I reached the heart tree and started climbing. The bark was hot under my hands, those glowing symbols burning my fingers, but I kept going. Below, Linda was running for the station. The walker was coming for me, its wooden body creaking as it reached up with those long branch arms. The other trees were going crazy, thrashing and swaying like they were in a storm. I climbed higher. The heart tree was fighting me, its bark trying to shake me off, but I held on. I could feel its hate, its anger at humans for cutting down its forest. But I could feel something else too, its pain, its loneliness. I understand, I whispered to it. You were supposed to protect this place, but hurting people isn't the answer. The walker screamed below me, that horrible sound of breaking wood and winter wind. Its green eyes blazed like forest fires. My hands found a cluster of pine needles near the top. They were different from normal needles, longer, darker, thrumming with a strange energy. I grabbed a handful, ignoring how they cut into my palm. Walker was climbing now, its wooden body bending in impossible ways as it came for me. I pulled out the flare gun with my free hand. Linda, I shouted. Cover your eyes. I struck the pine needles against the flare gun's barrel like matches. They sparked and caught fire immediately, giving off sweet-smelling smoke that glowed blue in the darkness. Then I pointed the flare gun straight down, straight at those green eyes. The walker reached for me just as I pulled the trigger. Red flare light and blue smoke mixed together in an explosion that lit up the whole forest. The walker's scream this time was different, more human, more afraid. The smoke poured into those green eyes and something started happening to its wooden body. The branches began to crack and split. The bark peeled away. Inside there was something glowing, something that looked like starlight wrapped in shadows. The true form of the walker. It looked at me one last time, and in those few seconds before the smoke took full effect, I felt its thoughts. It showed me the forest as it used to be, showed me why it was so angry. And I understood. I'll protect them, I whispered. The trees, the forest. I'll make sure no one hurts them again, I promise. The walker's form started to fade like mist in morning sun. The green light dimmed, and the walking trees slowly began to sink back into the ground. Their branches unwound, their roots replanted themselves. The last thing I saw before passing out was the heart tree's symbols stopping their glow, and Linda running back toward me through the settling snow. The forest was quiet again, but this time, it was a peaceful quiet, a protected quiet. 3 months later, the forest looks normal again, almost. I'm still a ranger here at Bridger Teton. The official report says we had a weird storm that knocked down some trees. Linda backed me up on that story. Who'd believe the truth anyway? But we both know what really happened. My hands still have scars from the heart tree's needles. They glow faintly at night, just enough to notice. And sometimes when I'm doing my rounds, the trees seem to bow their branches as I pass, like they're saying thank you. Linda visits often, taking samples and measurements. She says the forest is healthier than ever. The animals have returned and new saplings are growing straight and strong, but we've made sure no logging companies can touch this part of the woods. Some places need to stay wild. I keep Joe's journals in my station now, and I'm writing my own. 47 years isn't that long, really. Someday, another ranger will need to know what happened here. They'll need to know about the walker, about the heart tree, about the promise I made. Last week, a kid on a hiking trip asked me why all the trees in the grove point to the middle. I told him sometimes trees just grow that way. But he looked at me funny and said, "They're protecting something, aren't they? Kids, they see things clearer than we do sometimes." Late at night, when the moon is full, I drive out to the grove. The heart tree stands tall and quiet, its trunk scarred but healing. If you look closely, you can still see those ancient symbols in its bark, but they don't glow anymore. Not usually, anyway. But 2 nights ago, I saw something that made me smile and shiver at the same time. A single pine needle on the heart tree was glowing green, just for a moment. And in the snow around its roots, words appeared and then faded. Away, sleep well, Guardian, see you in 47 years. I'm not afraid anymore. The walker isn't evil. It's just doing its job, same as me. Protecting the forest, keeping the balance. And now we do it together. Linda says we should write a book someday, tell people what really happened. Maybe we will. But for now, I'm happy. Just doing my rounds, watching the trees grow, keeping my promise. After all, someone needs to be ready. 47 years will pass faster than you think, and the forest remembers everything. Story 4. The water shouldn't have moved that way. In all my 15 years as a park ranger in the Everglades, I'd never seen anything like it. The ripples went against the current, forming perfect circles that shouldn't have been possible. That was the first sign something was wrong on that muggy Florida night in 1985. But it wouldn't be the last. I'm Kevin Matthews, and at 44 years old, I thought I knew every inch of these swamps. The stories I'm about to tell you, well, let's just say they changed everything I believed about these waters. It started on a Tuesday evening in July. The air was thick enough to chew, and mosquitoes were having their usual feast despite the bug spray I'd practically bathed in. I was doing my regular water patrol in my trusty old boat. Nothing fancy, just a flat-bottom patrol vessel with a loud engine that had seen better days. The radio crackled with static every now and then, Jim at the station checking in like clockwork. "Base to Ranger Matthews, you copy." Jim's voice came through with its usual crackle. "Copy that, Jim, all quiet out here," I answered, wiping sweat from my forehead. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples that reflected off the dark water. Beautiful. If you didn't think too hard about what was lurking beneath the surface, that's when Tommy Rodriguez, one of our newer rangers, reported something strange over the radio. "Hey Kev, you seeing anything weird over by marker 23? Got some campers here saying their compass is acting funny." I checked my own compass, a habit as natural as breathing after all these years. The needle spun lazily, pointing nowhere in particular. That wasn't right. Not right at all. "Actually, yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "My instruments are going haywire too, probably just some electrical interference." But deep down, I knew better. Electrical interference doesn't make water move backward. The next morning, we found the first empty boat. It was just floating there, bumping gently against some cypress knees like a ghost ship in miniature. A small fishing vessel, the kind tourists rent all the time. The weird part? Everything was still in it. Tackle box, cooler full of sodas, even a half-eaten sandwich. But no people. The official report said they must have fallen overboard. Maybe got spooked by an alligator. But there was no sign of a struggle, no splashing, nothing broken. Just empty. Over the next few days, things got stranger. Fish started washing up on the banks, but not dead ones. Living fish flopping around on dry land like they were trying to escape something in the water. The local gators, usually territorial as can be, all disappeared from their usual sunning spots. Even the birds seemed different, avoiding certain parts of the water like they knew something we didn't. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything odd I noticed. The list got long real quick. Water moving in impossible patterns, compasses going crazy, animals acting scared, strange lights under the surface at night, weird echoes that didn't sound quite right, radio static getting worse near certain areas. My boss, Randy, said I was getting paranoid. "Matthews," he'd said, shaking his head, "you've been out in the sun too long, maybe take a few days off?" But I couldn't. Not with what I was seeing. The tourists might not notice, but I knew these swamps like the back of my hand. Something was wrong, really wrong. It all came to a head one evening when I was checking out reports of strange noises near Gator Creek. The sun had just set, and the frogs were starting their nightly chorus. I killed the engine to listen, letting my boat drift slowly in the dark water. That's when I heard it, a sound like singing, but not quite. More like, well, imagine if water could hum. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My flashlight beam caught something in the water, just for a second. Something that looked like a woman's face but distorted, like seeing a reflection in rippling water. Then it was gone. I reached for my radio, but it was dead. Not even static. Just dead silence. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like a wet blanket. And the water started to move. Not like normal currents or waves, but like it was alive, like it was reaching for my boat. I dealt with all sorts of things in my years as a ranger. Angry gators, lost tourists, storms that could flip your boat in seconds. But this was different. This was something else entirely. That night I made some calls. First to old Joe Thompson, who'd been a ranger here since before I was born. Then to Maria Sanchez at the local library, who knew every story and legend about these swamps. Both of them said the same thing. There were old tales, things the locals whispered about but never said too loud. Stories about something in the Furdor, water that could make you see things that weren't there, that could control the water itself. They called it the swamp siren. I didn't believe in monsters. Still don't really. But after what I saw that night, and what happened in the weeks that followed, well, sometimes not believing in something doesn't make it any less real. And the water kept moving in ways it shouldn't. This is my story. The story of what really happened in the Everglades that summer of 1985. A story about what lives in the dark water, what it wants, and how it changed everything. A story about the night tide, and the things it brought with it. And it's all true. Every single word. The next morning started like any other, but it wouldn't end that way. I grabbed my usual black coffee from the station's old pot, checked my gear twice, an old habit, and headed out to my boat. The sun was barely up, painting everything in that gray-blue light that makes the swamp look like it's still sleeping. Tommy, the new ranger I mentioned before, caught up with me at the dock. "Hey, Kev, mind if I tag along today? Randy wants me to learn your patrol route." He was carrying his own gear, looking eager as a kid on his first fishing trip. I nodded, though something in my gut told me to say no. "Sure, kid. Just keep your eyes open today, all right?" We pushed off from the dock, the engine coughing twice before rumbling to life. I showed Tommy how to read the depth finder, an old but reliable piece of equipment that had saved me from running aground more times than I could count. "See these numbers here?" I pointed to the display. "Anything less than 3 feet, we need to be careful. Lots of hidden logs and..." The depth finder suddenly went crazy, showing impossible readings. 1 second it said we were in 50 feet of water. Impossible in this part of the swamp. The next it claimed we were on dry land. Tommy frowned. "That's not right, is it?" "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, it's not. I killed the engine, letting us drift. The water was mirror smooth, which was strange for this time of day. Usually there'd be ripples from fish, birds, or the breeze, but nothing moved. That's when we heard it, a sound like someone humming but distorted, like it was coming through water. Tommy heard it too. I could tell by the way his face went pale. Maybe it's just some tourists with a radio, he suggested, but we both knew better. The sound wasn't coming from the shore. It was coming from under us. I reached for my radio. "Base, this is Matthews, you copy?" Nothing but static. I tried again. "Base, do you copy? Over." The static changed, turning into something that almost sounded like words, but not quite. Like someone trying to talk through water. Then the fog rolled in. Now, fog in the Everglades isn't unusual, but this was different. It came fast, too fast, and it was wrong. Normal fog is white or gray. This had a greenish tint, and it moved like it was alive, curling around our boat like fingers. "Kevin?" Tommy's voice shook slightly. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, our boat's engine suddenly roared to life, all by itself. The steering wheel spun on its own, and we started moving through the fog. I jumped to the controls, fighting with the wheel, but it was like wrestling with something alive. The more I tried to turn us around, the harder it fought back. "Cut the engine," I shouted to Tommy. He reached for the key but jerked his hand back with a yelp. "It's ice cold," he said, showing me his fingers. They were covered in frost, in the middle of a Florida summer. The fog parted just enough for us to see we were heading straight for a cluster of cypress trees. I grabbed the emergency kit from under my seat, pulled out the manual fuel cutoff, and yanked it hard. The engine died with a sputter, leaving us drifting. That's when we saw her. Through the fog, maybe 30 feet ahead, there was a woman standing on the water. Not in it, on it. She was pale as moonlight, with long dark hair that moved like it was underwater even though she was above the surface. Her eyes, I'll never forget her eyes. They were the same color as the deep water, and they seemed to pull at you like they wanted you to come closer. Tommy started to stand up, his eyes fixed on her. I grabbed his arm. "Don't look at her," I said, remembering all those old stories about sirens. "Tommy, look at me." He blinked, shaking his head like he was waking up. The woman, the thing that looked like a woman, smiled. Then she started to sink, slowly, into the water. But she didn't make a splash. The water just accepted her, like she was part of it. The fog lifted as quickly as it had come, leaving us in clear morning sunlight. Our depth finder started working again. The radio crackled back to life with Jim's voice asking where we were. Tommy sat down hard on the bench. What was that?" I checked our location on the map. We were almost 2 miles from where we'd started, in a part of the swamp I rarely patrolled. "That," I said, "was our first real look at what we're dealing with. Are we going to report it?" I thought about it. Report what? That our boat drove itself? That we saw a woman standing on water? That fog tried to grab us? They'd think we were crazy. Or worse, they'd believe us and send in a whole team of rangers, right into whatever trap that thing was setting. "We're going to be smart about this," I said finally. "We need to know more before we do anything. And Tommy, don't go out on the water alone, not until we figure this out." He nodded, still pale. "What do we do now?" I started the engine, manually, this time, and turned us toward home. Now we start preparing, because if there's one thing I learned in all my years out here, it's that seeing something like that once means you're going to see it again. And next time, we need to be ready. The Mahdi ride back was quiet. Both of us were lost in our thoughts, jumping at every splash or bird call. The swamp felt different now, like we were seeing it for the first time. Or maybe like it was seeing us for the first time. I dropped Tommy off at the station and made 2 stops on my way home. First to the library, where Maria helped me find every book they had on water spirits and local legends. Then to the hardware store, where I bought every flashlight they had in stock, plus extra batteries. Something told me we were going to need them. That night I sat at my kitchen table with all those books spread out around me, making notes. The radio played quietly in the background until a song came on. Something about a woman in the water. I turned it off. The last thing I wrote in my journal that night was a question. How do you fight something that can control the very water you're floating on? I didn't know the answer yet, but I had a feeling I was going to find out soon, whether I wanted to or not. I spent the next few days digging through old records at the ranger station. The more I looked, the more I found, and none of it made me feel better. Missing boats going back 20 years, strange lights on the water, radios, dying for no reason. Each report was different, but they all had something in common. They happened in the same parts of the swamp where Tommy and I had seen her. Maria from the library called me one morning. "Kevin, you need to come see this," she said. Her voice was quiet, like she was afraid someone might hear. "I found something in the old newspapers." The library was cool and dark compared to the sticky heat outside. Maria led me to a back room, where she'd spread out yellowed newspapers on a table. They were from 1962, more than 20 years ago. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a story, with the headline, "3 missing after strange lights reported in Everglades." I read it carefully. 3 rangers had gone out to check on some weird lights people were seeing in the water. They never came back. The search party found their boat 2 days later, floating empty. just like the tourist boat we'd found. There's more, Maria said, showing me another paper from 1953, same story, different names, and another from 1945 and 1934. Every 20 years or so, I said slowly, something happens, something big. And guess what year it is now? Maria asked. 1985, I answered, feeling cold despite the Florida heat. 20 years since the last time. I took the newspapers back to the station and showed them to Tommy. His face went white when he saw the dates. But what does it want? He asked. Why every 20 years? I shook my head. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That afternoon, I visited old Joe Thompson at his house by the swamp. Joe had been a ranger longer than anyone, and if anyone knew the truth, it would be him. Joe was sitting on his porch fixing an old radio. He didn't look surprised to see me. Figured you'd show up sooner or later, he said, putting down his tools. You've seen her, haven't you? The lady in the water? I nodded, sitting down in the old wooden chair next to him. What is she, Joe? He was quiet for a long time, just looking out at the water. My grandfather told me stories, he finally said, about something that lived in the deep parts of the swamp. Something that was here long before us, and'll be here long after. He said it was lonely, and every now and then it would try to find company. Company? I didn't like the sound of that. People, Joe said simply. It takes them down into the deep water, makes them like itself. He looked at me hard. Nobody who goes with it ever comes back. How do we stop it? Joe laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Stop it? Boy, you don't stop something like that. Best you can do is survive it. Stay away from the water when it's hunting. But I couldn't stay away. It was my job to be on the water, to keep people safe. Back at the station, I started marking a map with every strange thing that had happened. Red dots for missing boats, blue for weird lights, green for compass problems. A pattern started to show up. Everything happened in a big circle around one deep part of the swamp. Tommy watched me work. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it has a home, I said. A place it stays, where the water's deepest. And every 20 years it comes out looking for people. But why? What does it do with them? Before I could answer, the radio crackled to life. Through the static, we heard something that made our blood run cold, singing. The same underwater humming we'd heard before. I grabbed the radio. This is Ranger Matthews. Who's out there? Over. The singing got louder. Then a voice came through, distorted like it was underwater. Come, join us. Tommy grabbed his own radio and tried another channel. Same singing, same voice. We tried. Every channel. They were all the same. Then the power went out. In the dark station, with just our flashlights, we could hear water dripping, but there weren't any pipes above us and it hadn't rained. Kevin? Tommy's voice shook. The water, it's coming up through the floor. I shined my light down. He was right, water was seeping up between the floorboards, spreading across the room. But it wasn't normal water. It moved wrong, like it had a mind of its own. And in the beam of our flashlights, it looked almost green. Get to high ground, I said, grabbing the map and my research. Now! We ran outside. The night was pitch black. No stars, no moon. Just darkness and that strange singing coming from everywhere at once. Standing on the station's highest point, we watched as water crept up the stairs, one step at a time. It stopped just before reaching us, like it was being held back by something. It's getting stronger, I said, looking at my watch. And we've got 13 days until the 20th anniversary of the last disappearances. What happens then? I looked out into the darkness, where the singing was still floating on the air. I think that's when it makes its big move, when it takes as many people as it can. So what do? I gripped my flashlight tighter. We prepare, we study, and we figure out how to fight something that can control water itself. The water slowly retreated, leaving everything dry like it had never been there. But we knew better. We'd seen what it could do, and we knew it would be back. As we walked back into the station, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let it take anyone else. Whatever this swamp siren was, whatever it wanted, it would have to go through me first. But deep down, I had a feeling that's exactly what it wanted. Time was running out. We had just 3 days left until the 20th anniversary, and things were getting worse by the hour. That morning, I got a call from Tommy. His voice was shaking. "Kevin, you need to see this. I'm at Dock 7. When I got there, I understood why." He sounded scared. The water around the dock was moving in perfect circles, like someone had dropped hundreds of invisible stones. But that wasn't the worst part. In the middle of each circle, faces were appearing and disappearing. Faces of people we knew were missing. "Is that—" Tommy couldn't finish the sentence. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's the family from the empty boat we found." The faces looked peaceful, like they were sleeping underwater, but we knew better. Just then, our radios crackled. "Help! Please help!" It was a child's voice coming from somewhere in the swamp. We looked at each other. We knew it was probably a trick, but we had to check. That's what rangers do. I grabbed extra flashlights and my emergency kit. "Stay close," I told Tommy. "Whatever happens, don't get separated." We took my boat out, following the voice. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and red. The water was unusually still, like glass. Our boat barely made a ripple. "There," Tommy pointed to a small island ahead. Someone was standing on the shore. A little girl in a white dress, she was waving at us. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Tommy, what color was that dress the missing Miller girl was wearing when she disappeared?" He checked his notes. "White," he said slowly. "It was white." The girl on the shore smiled. Then she started to melt. Not like ice melting, but like she was turning into water. In seconds, she was gone, leaving only ripples behind. That's when our engine died. I tried to restart it, but nothing happened. We were drifting now, being pulled by a current that shouldn't have been there. The island was getting further away, and the water around us was starting to swirl. "Kevin?" Tommy's voice was tight with fear. "We've got company." I turned around. Rising from the water all around us were shapes, human shapes, made entirely of water. They looked like glass statues walking on the surface. I counted 12 of them, all the missing people. They reached for our boat with hands made of water. Wherever they touched, the metal frosted over like it had been frozen. The boat started to tip. "The flashlights!" I yelled, remembering something from my research. "Light splits water." We grabbed our flashlights and turned them on, sweeping the beams through the water people. Where the light hit them, they scattered like mist. But there were too many, and they kept coming back together. Then we heard it, that singing again, louder than ever. The water between the water people started to rise, forming another shape. This one was different. Bigger. More real. The swamp. Siren emerged, looking almost human except for her eyes. They were deep and dark like the bottom of the ocean. When she spoke, her voice was like 1,000 dripping faucets. "Join us," she said. "Be part of the water. Be with us forever." I felt it then, a pull in my mind, like when you're really tired and just want to close your eyes. The thought of sinking into cool, quiet water seemed so peaceful. "Kevin." Tommy's shout snapped me out of it. He was shining his flashlight right at the siren. Where the beam hit her, she hissed like hot water on a cold window. That's when I noticed something. Every time the light hit her, she moved away from it, backing toward the island. The same island, where all the disappearances had happened 20 years ago. She's hurting us, I realized, using the current to push us where she wants us. Tommy was still fighting off the water people with his flashlight. What do we do? I looked at our dead engine, then at the island, then at my emergency kit. Inside was a flare gun, the brightest light we had. "When I say now," I told Tommy, "point your flashlight straight down and hold on to something." I waited until we'd drifted closer to the island. The siren was watching us, probably thinking we were trapped. Maybe we were, but I had an idea. "Now!" I shouted. Tommy pointed his light at the water below us. I raised the flare gun and fired, not at the siren, but at the water between us and the island. The flare hit the water and everything went crazy. Steam exploded everywhere. The water people scattered. The siren screamed, a sound like waves, crashing on rocks. But most importantly, the bright light and heat created a sudden current, pushing us away from the island, away from whatever waited there for us. I grabbed the engine cord and pulled hard. This time it started. I turned us toward home and pushed the throttle as far as it would go. Behind us, the siren's scream turned into words. 2 days. In 2 days, you'll all be mine. We didn't stop until we reached the station. Both of us were soaked and shaking, but alive. For now. Tommy looked at me. What happens in 2 days? I checked my soggy notebook. The exact anniversary. When she's at her strongest. I paused. And when she'll come for everyone she can get. Can we stop her? I thought about how she'd reacted to the flare, to our flashlights. Maybe. But we're going to need help. And a lot more lights. We had 2 days to figure out how to fight something that could control water itself. 2 days to save everyone in the Everglades. And somewhere out in the swamp, 12 water people waited with their queen, ready for more to join them. The final day came with a storm. Not a natural one. The clouds moved wrong, swirling in circles like water going down a drain. By sunset, every radio in the station was playing that haunting underwater song. We were ready, or at least as ready as we could be. Tommy and I had spent the last 2 days gathering every light we could find. Flashlights, emergency flares, old spotlights from the maintenance shed, and even some construction lights that Randy let us borrow after we finally told him everything. He didn't believe us at first, but after seeing the water move by itself in his coffee cup while we talked, he changed his mind pretty quick. Remember the plan, I told everyone at our final meeting. We had 5 boats, each with 3 rangers. Every boat had enough lights to light up a football field. Stay in your groups, don't let her separate us. And whatever you hear, don't listen to the singing. We'd given everyone earplugs, but I knew they wouldn't block everything. The sirens. Song wasn't just in your ears. It got inside your head. As we headed out into the dark water, I kept checking my watch. According to the old reports, she would make her big move at midnight. We had 1 hour. The water was black as oil, but calm, too calm. No frogs singing, no bugs buzzing, no splashing fish. The swamp was holding its breath. Through the radio, Randy's voice crackled. Movement at point 3, water's acting weird. I turned my boat toward his position. The other boats followed, moving in the formation we'd practiced. As we got closer, I saw what he meant. The water was rising in a huge column, like an invisible giant was pushing it up from below. Then the column started to take shape. The swamp siren appeared, bigger than before, as tall as a house. Behind her, the 12 water people rose up. 2, but now there were more of them. Much more, hundreds of watery shapes all reaching toward our boats. Lights, I shouted into my radio. Now! Every boat turned on their lights at once, creating a ring of bright beams around the siren. She screamed, that terrible sound of waves on rocks, but she didn't retreat this time. Instead, she spoke. Too late, Rangers. The water is mine, and soon you will be too. The water between our boats started bubbling. More shapes were rising, faces I recognized from missing persons reports going back decades. Each one became another water person, joining her army. Tommy pointed to something. The water. Kevin, look. Our depth finder was going crazy, showing impossible numbers. The water under us was getting deeper, like something was digging a huge hole in the bottom of the swamp. That's when I understood. She's making a whirlpool. Everyone, pull back. But we couldn't. The current was too strong, pulling us in a giant circle around her. The water people grabbed at our boats with freezing hands. Our lights kept them back, but just barely. The siren smiled. The deeper the water, the stronger I become. Watch. She raised her arms, and the water rose with them. Giant waves appeared. In the calm swamp, rocking our boats. One of the ranger boats nearly capsized. We were running out of time. Midnight was minutes away. That's when I remembered something old Joe had said. Best you can do is survive it. But he was wrong. We could do more than survive. "Tommy," I shouted over the chaos. "The flares, all of them." He understood immediately. We'd brought boxes of emergency flares, the kind that burn hot enough to be seen for miles. Everyone. I called through the radio. "Light your flares and throw them in a circle around her. Not at her, around her." One by one, bright red flares splashed into the water, hissing and burning even underwater. They made a ring of fire and light, turning the black water red. The siren screamed again, but this time it was different. Scared. "The steam!" Tommy yelled. "Look! Where each flare burned, it heated the water, creating clouds of steam. The steam rose up higher and higher until it formed a wall around the siren and her water people. "More lights," I ordered. "Everything. We've got." Every boat turned on every light, pointing them at the steam. The beams reflected and split, creating thousands of bright lines in the mist. Each line cut through the water people like scissors through paper. The siren thrashed, trying to escape, but she was trapped in our ring of light and steam. The whirlpool started spinning backward. All around us, the water people were falling, part turning back into normal water. "No!" she shrieked. "They're mine! The water is mine!" But she was getting smaller, losing her power as the steam and light tore away at her watery form. The whirlpool spun faster, but now it was pulling her. Down, not us. In the last moment before midnight, she looked right at me. Her deep, dark eyes weren't scary anymore, just sad. "I only wanted company," she whispered. Then she was gone, pulled down into the depths of her own whirlpool. The water people vanished with her. The steam cleared, leaving nothing but calm, normal water reflecting our lights. We searched for hours, but found no trace of her. The water was its normal depth again. Our compasses worked, the radios played only static. As the sun rose, Tommy asked the question we were all thinking. "Is she really gone?" I looked out at the peaceful morning water. "No," I said honestly. "Something that old, that powerful, it doesn't just disappear. But I think she'll think twice before trying this again." We never saw the swamp siren again, at least not like that night. Sometimes on quiet evenings, rangers still hear faint singing over their radios. Sometimes the water moves in strange ways. But now we know what to look for. Now we know how to fight back. I still patrol these waters, still carry extra flashlights, and every 20 years we make sure we're ready. Just in case. Because out there in the deep water, something is waiting. Something that controls the night tide, and it remembers us.